All right, let's turn to your guide to pollsters because I think this is very helpful for people. You
Mhm.
have been quick to point out this dynamic here that I'll read this part of the beginning of your piece. While past elections usually only saw one or two well-known firms with systemic Republican slants, the Biden era has seen a rise of a huge number of such pollsters who often put out just as much, if not more, data than nonpartisan firms. Can you talk about this new dynamic in polling and these Republican slanted firms kind of cropping up and being included in things like Nate Silver's average, for example?
Yeah, I think this is an instance where the kind of institutional sort of people who follow this, who have been doing this like since like the 2000s or even earlier than that, are not really kind of adjusting as much to the new reality. The presumption, like the kind of game theory sort of logic for why Nate Silver would always include everybody and everybody into his models was that like every firm has their primary incentive is to be as correct as possible so they can make more money and get more clients. So we shouldn't assume anything about their motivations other than that they want to like have the most accurate numbers possible. Like that was just like the rule that he had. Anything other than that would just be unfair discrimination. And I think like in 2012, that was probably a fair thing to say. I don't think that's what things look like now in an era of widespread election denial and extreme polarization, where like it's a lot less. There's a lot less of an incentive to like try to be the number one rated pollster in the New York Times like polling metric rating system or whatever like they have, or like 538's rating system. That's a lot less of like that's a lot less lucrative than to just have the best numbers for Trump as much as possible, so you can be put on Fox News to talk about why Trump is winning. This was already dynamic for like years. I think like in the late 2000s during the Tea Party, they would have Scott Rasmussen, who would repeatedly go on Fox to say how his polls vindicated like Republican Party talking points. And this has become a whole industry in the era of Trump, where you have these entire pollsters whose whole purpose is to fashion results that show results, and often like shifts that just fit entirely in line with Republican talking points. People become huge celebrities off of doing this. They like get constant like appearances on like TV and on radio off of having these results that go a certain way. So we're at a point for half of the political world, the incentive is not to have the most accurate results. It's to have the most like pro-Trump results. And in 2022, we saw this happening constantly, where it wouldn't just be the very well-known, the people who were well-known for giving pro-Republican results, like gave very extreme numbers for them. There were like, I think Trafalgar had one race in Vermont they said was within single digits, and they were off by 30 points on that. But there were also like a lot of smaller firms that were popping up with similar numbers that were also trying to get like a lot of attention. Not only were these like professional outlets, a lot of these were just run by like there was one firm that was just run by two high school teenagers.
Can you
like
sorry to cut you
yeah.
off, Josh, but like this is, you have a group in, you categorize these in your piece. Again, people should be subscribing to your Substack. This is this section called "The Firms Run by Teenagers and or Right-Wing Twitter Accounts." Talk about this new dynamic, as you were about to get into, but these other right-wing pollsters that are run by literal teenagers.
Yeah, so the first one of this was like a very kind of memorable moment. If you ever follow elections on Twitter, it was the Pennsylvania race with Oz and Fetterman, and there was like Fetterman started off with these really, really big double-digit leads, and then it started kind of falling a little bit as like he wasn't able to campaign, and his polarization kind of kicked in at the end. And people like thought that his odds were plummeting, and there was always a question like, who will be the first pollster to show Dr. Oz ahead? And then like in early October, there was a pollster that showed Dr. Oz ahead. It was called Patriot Polling. It was run by two like actual teenagers in a high school, like I don't know, like a high school somewhere, and it said Dr. Oz was leading. Everybody thought this was like the biggest joke like they've ever seen. But then like the same day, Nate Silver included Patriot Polling in his model. Like this firm with no track record, run by like self-admittedly run by high schoolers, he puts their data in there like at the same like right next to like every other pollster who's like that's run by actual professionals. that's sort of an extreme example, like where it's just obviously kind of like a joke. I thought like there was no explanation for that, and that he was deliberately trying to like shift like the margins in favor of Republicans. But he included them. He included several firms like that are run by adults, but like are controlled by like election deniers, like that just like
SoCal,
to
Qantas News.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that you list there, right?
Yeah, those are new ones. Those are not run by they could be run by adults. They are run by they have started this year, and they are run by right-wing Twitter accounts. SoCal is actually, I thought, was a bit of like kind of a gallant to the goofuses of this sort of thing, because he does try to make himself look legitimate, even though he is like a right-wing like Twitter account guy who's like fake DMs to like in feuds with like liberal Twitter people. Like, but he like, and then Qantas like he does the same thing as him. They basically just they do like the cheapest possible surveys on these like AI like polling survey like software companies, and they don't actually have much control over their own results besides weighting, which can be pretty significant. But like they have been included too. SoCal polling is in the 538 average. Qantas polling is in the 538 average. Qantas polling was like on Twitter literally bragged about moving like an average towards Republicans once, and like 538 just like they sent one guy to call him. They just said, "Oh, sorry, my bad. That's not what I meant." And then it also got revealed that he failed to disclose funding from like far right companies for his polling, like far right organizations. And he also like just said, "Oh, my bad," and they haven't gotten rid of him on the site. The kind of threshold for like just keeping these people like on these very big agenda setting like aggregators that like influence campaign decisions and drive coverage, there is basically no quality control for this. They see it as like impossible to like make any judgments beyond just like what the numbers say, and including these people, like even when they're like they have no experience or no background or no like professional track record on any of this, or like in the case of Trafalgar or Rasmussen, they're run by like people who deny elections. I think Rasmussen polling is like denied the Holocaust. Like it is like there is no floodgates for this sort of stuff, and it's making this should not be a difficult issue to deal with. But like if you're just a lay person following this, like you have no idea what the backgrounds for any of these things are.
You mentioned Rasmussen.
I think it's a terrible mistake.
Yeah, those are the junk, teenager-run ridiculous ones, SoCal, Qantas, and then notoriously Patriot Polling. Those are newer, and that speaks to this dynamic of these right-wing groups seemingly funding these, in some instances, these right-wing leaning pollsters that are getting aggregated and into models like the one that Nate Silver is a part of. We should say that he's now a part of Polymarket, which I guess is a crypto Peter Thiel backed thing.
I will say that hasn't changed any of his decision making. He is still making all of the same like kind of like editorial decisions he's always made for his model. I don't agree with them, but he hasn't like shifted his philosophy in favor of them or anything. And his model actually shows very like better numbers for Kamala now than it ever has before. I think she's up to 58% on there.
Yeah,
but,
it's just something to note.
I would not be involved in a political betting market. I think that
as a pollster aggregator. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't bet on politics, and I'm just a guy who writes about them. But I don't want to give off the impression that like I'm like trying to make money off of what I write. I would never do that. I don't get why people are so lax about that.
Because you could be writing, but Josh, you could be writing things to move the market in another direction, so you could get better odds on betting on the outcome that you actually think is going to happen. That's how this works.
Yeah, I mean, that's obvious to me. It's not obvious to like other people. But I will say I do not bet on politics, and I never will. I think that's a very basic thing for me to sacrifice in order to do what I do.
Same here, and I enjoy gambling on sports, but I've never bet on politics.
Yeah.
So Rasmussen, you mentioned, they've been along for a while. You write here, it's denied everything from the 2020 election to vaccine safety to the Holocaust, but they have some like respectability and is often cited by Trump. The others that you should look out for
all the time
are the Trafalgar Group, McLaughlin and Associates, Harvard Harris, no association to Kamala Harris. They're the ones that are run by. Is that
Mark
that?
Penn.
That's the Zionist one, right?
Yeah, it is a Zionist one that has like the really like the push pull stuff that AIPAC cites. Mark Penn is the former Clinton advisor who was a consultant for Trump during his presidency.
By the way, some Clinton to Trump pipeline, if you want to include Alan Dershowitz in there.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
That's a whole nother bag.
Mm-hmm.
Insider advantage is the other one that leans right. If you could just tell people a little bit more about that one.
Yeah, Insider Advantage, I know them very well because they're another, like Trafalgar is also based in Atlanta. Insider Trading, or as I like to call them, is based in Atlanta. Insider Disadvantage is run by a former Republican member of the Georgia State House of Representatives. He's very close friends with Robert Kahale, who is the guy who runs Trafalgar, who is like basically like, there's a good article about this from 2 years ago, but like basically the guy kind of just chooses the results of his polls ahead of time. He takes his own samples for each poll, and like basically just his results aren't even really results; they're just kind of guesswork. Basically, like it's like really like they're the ultimate disregard. But Towery is like really close with Kahale. They run a podcast together, which is kind of cute. I do like that. I'm happy for them. And he goes on Fox News a lot. He's one of these, like I call them Fox News merchants, because they're always on like Ingram or whatever to like talk about how their polling numbers are good for Trump. And he also does deny the 2020 election results and says Democrats are doing fraud. So like you can kind of see where his kind of preferences are dialed towards, like kind of like propping up that narrative as opposed to getting the most accurate results to what the certified results are.
And I'll let you go in a second, Josh, but you know, there are polls that have more succinct and transparent methodologies that are Democratic leaning, like Morning Consult leans a little bit Democrat in their results. But what should people
they're not like run by Democratic
right, but right, exactly.
Like,
yeah. Go on.
They just have certain methodologies that have been decent for Democrats. I will say about Morning Consult, they gave Biden consistently pretty bad numbers when he was in the race. They just happen to be pretty good for Kamala now. I wouldn't really disregard them, although they aren't really the kind of A standard stuff. They are a tracker poll, and tracker polls aren't like really as good for the precise numbers.
And so who are the polls that you say people should trust the most to look out for and not get, I mean, you can look at the ratings, but for you in this election cycle, which are the pollsters that have been the most accurate and transparent?
Yeah, well, I was really impressed by Marist in 2022. They put out results like right before the Senate races that year that were very accurate. They got the Pennsylvania race very closely, the Georgia race very closely, and the Arizona race very closely that year. They had a set of surveys that had very close tied races basically in the Sun Belt, and Kamala leads in the Midwest, which fit very closely with my priors. So I think that they are once again correct. But the New York Times has been a bit weird this year. They've had some like more pro-Trump numbers consistently than other firms. I think even to the point where the guy who runs Rasmussen was like, "Oh yeah, these guys are oversampling Trump supporters," which I thought was like funny because I've never seen anybody in that world say that before. But they were very like accurate in 2022, so accurate they doubted their own results. But like, I mean, I'm not so certain about them. I think the results are a little bit hard to square with the other stuff we've seen this year, but they're pretty good. Let me think what else. The state level, like native state pollsters. I know there's a guy, Joshua Smithy in Pennsylvania, and he always like says to keep track of state level pollsters in that state. I mean, I can't think of much else on the top of my head, but
sure.
Like the A+ pollsters on the sites are usually pretty reliable.
Washington Post Ipsos, ABC Ipsos, that kind of deal. Yeah, they've been pretty consistently good. All right, well, I think that gives people a good guide. I wanted, there's a lot of like...
Yeah, like the NBC, ABC, Washington Post, like big name firms are usually pretty good. If Reuters, Ipsos does shit for everybody, they can be kind of weird sometimes, but like they're not like objectively terrible or anything.
It's just good for people to have this information because the poll denialism is something that, I mean, you and I have talked about this, is frustrating, but it's aided and abetted by these Republican junk polls that are shifting the averages.
The institutional aggregators who refuse to provide context.
And that's just not, there's no equivalent on the left or on the Democratic side. There really isn't.
There should, if somebody wants to make a lot of money, they probably could do this. Like people always say, oh, why don't Democrats do this? Why don't they have their fake pollsters? This shows a lack of confidence. That it only shows people who are not on the ball in terms of like being able to make a lot of money. If you like created a polling firm called like Lepanto Strategies or like Blue Wave Polling or whatever, and you put out shit showing Kamala up in Florida, you would be on MSNBC News within a week. Like you would like get so much attention. You would, but you know, I mean, I like Democrats taking it to the Republicans on that front, but I don't even know what the value is. It just feels like Republican pollsters are doing this for those people to get money. No, the
for them to. I don't care about them getting money, Josh.
People. Yeah, yeah. Well, it doesn't provide value to like the world. Okay. But like this is just my advice to somebody who wants to grift.
Yes, thank you for that. I really appreciate that advice. Thanks so much.
Subscribe to Ettingermentum for a kickback.
Yeah, exactly. Ettingermentum.news. You are one of my favorite writers, particularly on electoral politics. So appreciate all of that and support Ettingermentum over at his Substack. Thanks for calling in, and hope you're safe down in Georgia, even though I know it's some stormy weather.
Good. Miranda says hi.
Hi, Miranda. Good to she, viewers may remember, called in to talk about the polio epidemic in Gaza with her set of expertise. So really appreciate that. Thanks so much, Josh. Have a good rest of your day. All right.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me on as always.
For sure.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.